This week's episode has been sponsored by Oh My Bod, shifting the evolution of pleasure. Hi, this is Suzanne, and you're listening to Sex Advice for Seniors. And I have lots of conversations with people around changes that occur in their sexual life as a result of the menopause. I talk a lot about erectile dysfunction, which tends to start happening to men in their early 50s, really, and onwards. But I don't talk a lot about people in their 70s and 80s, mainly because a lot of the people I speak to are not in their 70s and 80s, and maybe they don't have clients in their 70s and 80s. But my guest today is a much younger woman, but she does work with much older people. And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about much older people and what happens to them, or, what changes can go on in later lives. I'd like to welcome Emma Shandy Anway. Such a mouthful, that. She's based on the West Coast of America. She's a psychotherapist. She specializes in relational and sex therapy. And she also does longboarding, which I don't know what that is, but it's something that happens on the water. I'm assuming it's a water sport in some way, and I don't really get involved in that. But anyway, we don't have to talk about that. I just thought it was an interesting side note. So Emma, welcome to Sex Advice for Seniors.
Thanks, Suzanne. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, and we were talking just before we started recording about the fact that you do see couples in their 70s. And what is the reason, is there one reason that they come to you? Why do they come to you? Or why does somebody, give me an example of why somebody would come to you in their 70s, for example.
Absolutely. So for a lot of people, when we're reaching this kind of decade of life, 70s and 80s, there is this reckoning with mortality that happens in a way that we don't see even when we hit our 50s and 60s, right? You're really feeling your age. A lot of times I'll have clients kind of describe themselves as frail for the first time. I'm really understanding that there is a limit to my life. And with that often comes this almost push of, wait a minute, no, let's make the most of it. It's not over yet. And at least in America, we are an entirely puritanical culture that gives no good sex education. And what we find is that so many, especially heterosexual couples, go their whole life just having sex that's okay. It's fine. It's good enough. And so when we hit 70, 75, 80, and we go, wait, could there be something more? It's almost like you finally get this catalyzing boost to go, I want to push all the corners to see what is possible. And so it can actually be this liberating jump into this new world, right? That maybe you never gave yourself before.
Cool. And would you when people say the word good sex, I find that a very difficult word because what is good for one person is not so good for another, right? So when people say we've had okay sex, but we want to make it better, what do they mean?
Yes. Yeah. So I'm going to actually even replace my word good with magnificent. How do we make it magnificent, right? So when we think of good enough, it's all right. I always like to use this analogy of there's a granola bar on the shelf and I'm hungry, so I'll eat the granola bar and it was fine. I'm not really craving it, but I'll go back to it and have it. Versus if I see a piece of chocolate cake, I fucking love chocolate cake and I'm going to eat it. And then I see it again and I'm going to go find it. And then I'm going to be like, where did I put that cake? Right? It's like this exciting desire. I'm craving this. I'm wanting it. Versus it's okay, right? There's a vitality to it. There's a mindfulness to it. There's a savoring of the pleasure that so often we just disassociate from or don't even know is possible as we go through the motions.
So are these people that want to, would you say, explore the boundaries of sex beyond what I would consider fairly, again, not a word that I'm particularly fond of, but I'm going to use it anyway, vanilla sex, where, they might have the missionary position and then somebody does doggy style and maybe somebody gets a blowjob if they're lucky. kink or polyamory or opening up the relationship? Like, are they looking to make it expansive beyond the realms of what would be considered fairly,
Sure.
traditional sex? Or are they looking to, and I realize, we might, everybody's different, but what is it that they're seeking?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, you can have an orgasm, right? Like, well, not everybody does, but let's say you have sex where both people have orgasms.
Yeah.
Most people would consider that to be good
Mm-hmm.
enough.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Totally. So I'm totally, hearing the question around like, what does that even mean? Like, are we going to like a whole kink fest now? Do I have 40 partners? I'm like, maybe for some people, that's what it is. But what I kind of see more in my office is this idea of, let's take a couple, maybe they've been together for like 3 decades and they're kind of looking at each other with fresh eyes, right? Wait, I don't just have to go through the motions with you, right? There is a way to rewrite this whole menu. There is a way to still make you exciting and me exciting. Right. And I think what often happens again when we are in these aging bodies is what once worked does not work anymore, not because you are broken, but because your body's changing. And so a lot of times, instead of addressing that, we can fall into shame, right? We can fall into insecurity. And so having people have the ability to go, wait a minute, my body's still beautiful. I'm still sexy. I just need to rewrite this menu with you. Can we start with that? Right? So that's where we kind of start. And then, some people end up going, you know what? Let's open the relationship. That's where we want to land. Other people are like, you know what? This revitalization just between the two of us is enough. But it's almost this idea of like, what was once just going through the motions is not anymore, right? There's a place to feel this like magnificence, this vitality again.
And do you find that when people come to you, they start out from a place of disappointment or they start out from a place of, look, we just don't know how to make it better.
Yes.
But we know that we'd like to.
Yeah. Great question. I would say grief work is almost always a part of this. There is almost always a lot of work spent going, oh my God, I didn't even know it could be different. Right? I just thought it had to be this way. And that is a loss, right? And it doesn't have to be the end of the story. We get to move through that and then say, and now let's own it, right? Let's figure out. I think a lot of times people come in not even knowing the emotional weight they've been carrying. And that eventually comes out as they're starting to untangle all of this and why they've even gotten to this place in the first place.
Yeah. And do you find that most people that come to you as two willing partners, or there's normally a driving partner behind the intention to see you?
Okay, so what's so interesting is that in the 50s to 60s, there's almost always a driving partner. Okay. Predominantly what I have been seeing is men bringing their wives in because their wives are fed up and done. And the men are freaking out. Now, the 70s and 80s, at least just from my personal experience, it has been completely mutual. It's almost the sense of like, we're here together, right? We've made it this far along and we want to capitalize on this time together. So it's this very interesting switch that you see from this strap to this gap.
That's so fascinating and also so encouraging, I think, for people that have kind of gotten to the other end of, to that stage, because I think you're right. Like what I hear all the time is that a lot of, and often from men, I have to say, is my wife is going through the menopause. She says that her libido's gone through the floor. She doesn't have any desire anymore. I'm really frustrated. We've talked about maybe opening up the relationship, but she's not happy with that. And, so there's this deep sense of frustration.
Yeah.
It feels like on the part of men of that age. And then there's this kind of resignation often on the part of women who have just said, well, I'm not that bothered, actually.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
So this is your problem. I'm not owning it. I'm just like letting you deal with your own frustration.
Totally.
I think that's interesting that later on, if you can make it over that rocky patch, potentially, you might get to a place where you're like, "Oh, let's
Yeah.
see, now that I'm over the hot flashes and this and
Yeah.
that and all the shit." And that's kind of what
Same.
happened to me is my 50s were shit in
Mhm.
terms of just feeling unsexy,
Mhm.
really. Just not hot flashes, the usual stuff that's common with menopause, and really having to own and grieve over the loss of that libido I wasn't going to recapture. But then, moved into a different place in my 60s and thought, oh, okay, I'm over this now. So I can revisit some of that because I
Yes.
can sleep next to somebody without covering them with sweat.
Yes, totally. Like good baseline.
Let's face it, unless that's your kink, it's not very sexy, is it?
Mm-hmm, totally. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's so true. Right. And it's interesting. There's these parallels between the postpartum period and the postmenopausal period, right? Where again, it's this reckoning that is only for the female, right? Physiologically, where they are then in this place of going, hold on, do I still want this? I have just gone through so much. Do I have capacity to invest? And to your point of women kind of showing that apathy, a lot of women don't. And they're kind of like, I'm done. You need
Yeah.
to step up. Right. But the invitation then is, well, how do you trust? If your partner is stepping up, can you come along? Right. Don't give up on yourself and your sexuality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, we often, and I suspect even more so nowadays with the requirement for young mothers to be, prioritizing their children above everything else in their lives to the point where their partners really just don't get a look in.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if that's happened
Mm-hmm.
when your kids are growing up, then it's not uncommon that when you become an empty nester and they've left home, you're like, who are you?
Yeah.
I don't.
Yes, exactly. That disconnection, right? It comes with time. It's slow. It's very rare. It's just all of a sudden I wake up and I'm like, "Bleh." It's like micro moments over years that build up.
Yeah, absolutely. So do you think, I'm just curious, what mindset shifts are most helpful for people
Oof.
who are feeling kind of discouraged or out of practice?
Yeah, totally. So I always come back to Esther Perel. She's an amazing
We love Esther Perel.
Love
Yeah.
Esther. We love her. We all want to be her when we grow up. So
I know. I tried to get her haircut at one point. I was
yeah,
like, I'm
totally.
looking at her hair going, kind of asymmetrical. It's kind of interesting. I noticed she changed it recently. So I'm like, oh, she's it.
That's so
Yeah.
Yeah. But, her definition of the erotic is life force. It's your vitality. It has nothing to do with my partner or my marriage. Like it starts with you. And that's an ageless thing, right? That sense of my life force. And so if you are in that place where you're just feeling despair or disconnect or apathy, going back to Suzanne, your question of like, what the fuck is longboarding, Emma? The reason I throw it in there is because that is actually what I started doing to help myself come back into my body and my vitality, right? Like after I had kids, I completely lost my sense of self. And then I taught myself how to skateboard. And all of a sudden I was like joyful and different, right? And feeling that energy. And the thing that's interesting about that is that's not what we assume is overtly sexual. But you know what having my vitality did to me? It made me more inclined to want to explore sexually, right? Because I was feeling confident again. So I think, again, no matter how old you are, if you're 25 or 85, it's what are you doing for yourself to tap into that life force, right?
Yeah.
Not even looking at the relationship yet. How are we juicing you up again? Reminding you of your eroticism, right? Of that power. And then notice how having that as a baseline can spread out, right?
Yeah. And one of the things, another little Esther Perel tip that you've probably read is that she does this thing with Post-it notes, which I think is a lovely little kind of game that you can play with your partner, which says, write in your Post-it note, I turn myself on when, and then I turn myself off when. And I love that for, again, what is it that that brings joy into your life? And it's not turning yourself on by turning on a vibrator. It's turning yourself on, for me, by singing or, meeting up with friends for a glass of wine or just like hanging out with people that I really love and just shooting the shit, right? And for other people, it's being alone with a book or doing some art or whatever. And conversely,
Yeah.
those times when you really beat yourself up, like what are those times where you think I regret having done that, which might be just like stuffing your face with chocolate, or when you've just already had a big meal and you're like, I didn't need to eat a chocolate bar, right? But
Really?
I think understanding what gives you pleasure, and others knowing
Yes.
that's you in your joy
Yes.
is sexy. It is sexy.
It's so
When people are doing things they love, it is sexy. I don't care what age they are,
It's
you know.
magnetic. Absolutely. Absolutely. I think the other thing, just kind of, speaking more to the elderly population, is really being able to examine, like, what are your own internal narratives around sexuality and sex with aging, right? Can
Yeah.
you let go of the myth that aging decreases sexual potential? It does not. Right? What we have seen in the research is that actually the best sex, this is so interesting. Peggy Kleinplatz, she's a Canadian sex therapist, psychologist. She did this incredible study on sexuality and longevity and found that the best sex was reported after 60 and 70. Right? Not when you're hot, young 24-year-old, whatever. And so can we lean into it and get curious about wait, maybe my body doesn't look the way it used to, but actually, does that matter? Is there a way to still find that? And then we go back to the eros, that vitality again.
Definitely. And body confidence it's something that as we move through the aging process,
Yeah.
and we stop, and we have to accept the fact that there are certain changes happening in our body, and it's not going to go back to the way it was, except if you put in either you have surgery or you put in a supreme amount of effort. I mean, sadly, I'm seeing loads of people that I know going on weight loss drugs. And
Yeah.
I just think, God, if you can't get to like 60 years old and just accept your body or work out what you need to do to change it but there's so much pressure on women at all stages of life
So much
to be slim. And I think that makes it really hard if you've never been comfortable in your body to then share that body with someone else, right? I mean, it makes sense that why would you want to if it's never been a happy place for you?
Entirely, right? Yes. And, you bringing up women, especially, I think is so important because we kind of have this narrative of women become these old women, but men become more desirable as they age. And, this trend of older men finding younger partners, which means women their age feel this pressure to look younger. It is so deeply embedded, right? It's so deeply embedded. Yeah.
Yeah. And especially when when you are an older person, you talked at the beginning about, we don't have sex education. We don't learn anything about sex. So, and it's the same thing about how do we become comfortable in our bodies? Nobody teaches us that.
No, no.
It's just something we either do,
Yeah.
or we spend our lives wrestling with a body that we don't like. And I think for a lot of people, that's the situation, is just constantly wrestling with a body that you think is undesirable.
Entirely. It's heartbreaking. It is a great unlearning, and I have two very small children. One of them is 3 and loves being naked. It's so funny. And we were at the beach the other day and my partner and I were like, give it 5 minutes. This dude's going to take his clothes off, right? And there he was. And he's shameless and it's beautiful. And people chuckle and he's just like, woo! And what I always tell people is we were all that. We were all that 3-year-old who was so embodied and so shameless. And society and messaging and trauma and slowly stripped it out of us. So then how do we refine that? Because it's not entirely gone. I really don't believe that. And if you once had it, then it absolutely is possible to find again, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, any practical tips there?
Yeah, absolutely. Take your clothes off at the beach. Just kidding.
Get arrested.
Totally. Well, as simple as it sounds, one exercise is starting fully clothed and just looking in the mirror and finding one thing that you like. So maybe today I'm looking in the mirror and I'm like, I like the color of my eyes. Beautiful. We're going to do it again tomorrow. No, tomorrow I'm noticing my hands are really dainty. And as simple as this sounds, especially for women, typically the default is critical, critical, critical. I look fat. I
Yeah.
look this. I look this. So what we're doing here is creating a new neural pathway in our brain of my body is pretty. There is something nice in my body. And with repetition, that becomes a little bit more solidified. And then we move on to the next fear. Okay, can you stand in your underwear? Let's look at your stomach. How are we feeling about that, right? Let's take it in. And again, it sounds so micro, but it has a big ripple effect, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
The other thing that, yeah, well, yes, yeah.
No. Over to you. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I like to use fashion as a self-expression tool. And I think it's something that, again, we so quickly conform what looks good, what should I be wearing, that we forget it is a pure form of self-expression. So go
Yeah.
into your closet and go, do I actually like these? What do I actually feel pretty in? And find that thing and wear it. Right? How do I make
Yeah.
this mine? Because when we step into this idea of I'm owning this is my body, this is my space, it changes our energy, right? It allows us to tap into that vitality again. And then we see that kind of ripple effect.
Yeah. And the same goes for me in the bedroom. I
Mm.
always say more is more. So you don't have to take off all your clothes. You don't have to start by taking off all your clothes.
Absolutely.
You could keep on like a silky little robe. You can get some sexy,
Yes.
like a sexy lacy bodysuit. Like there is so much now on websites for, larger women, women of all sizes. And there's no age at which you have to stop wearing that stuff.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you can wear that stuff at any age.
No.
And if it makes you feel more sexual, if it makes you feel more attractive, if it makes you feel more vital, then great. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing, there's it. And you don't ever have to take it all off if you don't want to.
No.
Like, there is something quite sexy about leaving something on
Totally.
and flesh and stuff being revealed. And I always think that people really don't appreciate enough about, how simple things like a sexy pair of underwear can just make you feel better.
Yeah. And I think that phrasing there is so key. You said, make you feel better. I'm not doing this because I think it's going to make my partner want me and it's me. I feel that, right? For me. And there we go.
Yeah. And I think sex between two people is two people stepping into a space collectively where both of them have to want it, because if one wants and the other one doesn't, then that to me is not good sex. So let's move on just kind of quickly around things like alternative relationships. Do you find that in this age group as well there is more querying, more curiosity around looking at other kinds of relationships and what another kind of relationship might look like?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know if you've seen the statistics around like STIs and like retirement.
Oh yeah, know
Right?
about that.
But yes, right? Like what data shows us is people are enjoying their sex life and their creative expression. And so for a lot of people, it is this kind of curiosity of like, hold on, like maybe I don't have to compartmentalize and shame away things I've wondered about my whole life anymore, right? If I've maybe in the back burner been like, gosh, an open relationship, what would that be like? Or could I have a friend with benefit? Or do I want this? It's this invitation to go, maybe I can. And if I'm partnered, maybe I can say to my partner, hey, babe, what do we think about a new adventure, right? Like there's not, again, there actually, I think, is a lot of power in owning our mortality and going, we've lived this full life. Wow. And why not? Right? What is there to lose? And when people really step into that, I think it opens up this whole treasure trove of fun things to explore.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only challenge, certainly, what I've noticed is that the older that you get, the more challenging it becomes to find play partners, for example, or other kinds or kinky people or other people that might want to play around with you because it is skewed to, well, it's not skewed to super young people because I've been in and around the various lifestyles for decades. I do think that there are loads and loads and loads of older people in kink, well, especially in kink, because often kink doesn't involve penetrative sex. And, if you've got a chronic illness, then sometimes kink is like much more fun than trying to accomplish things that are just, frankly, going to be problematic.
Totally. Yeah.
But sometimes it's, what I hear from older people who have the desire to explore is that it's really hard to find people. And I don't know if that's true in California, but I know certainly in London, there just gets to a point where it's just hard to meet people.
Yes, it is. It's often I hear this, like, I've met everyone there is to meet almost, right? Everyone that's like, it makes everything feel small. And you're not wrong. Right. I do think that while it's not restricted to young people, the demographic that tends to draw towards this is a little bit on the younger side. Right. So then the question is, well, do I want to play with people younger? Do I feel comfortable with that crossover? Or am I actually looking for partners my own age? And if that's the case, then we rely on how helpful the internet can be, because truly there are so many different social groups, right? Social networks that you can get so almost hysterically specific about to look into.
Yeah.
And with that, though, right, it's almost like the more niche something is, the less people they're going to be. And so I do think acknowledging that that is a reality does matter,
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think I was talking with another therapist a few weeks ago, and we were saying, one of the great things about exploring fantasies and kink, doesn't matter at what stage of life you are, once you open that Pandora's box, if you open it with a partner, you can literally start out by just making it a fantasy as part of your it doesn't necessarily have to be a real person that's in the room, It could just be something that you're talking about, role playing between yourselves, and you might get just as much enjoyment out of that as you do out of trying to go down the rabbit hole that is like finding a third or finding some kinky person.
Yeah, no, and that's the thing, right? I am so pro monogamy, and I am also so pro non monogamy, right? It's like, you do you. Be careful not to sequester yourself away, right? Like, a lot of times I hear people being like, well, if I'm married, like, that's just it, right? If I want some excitement, I've got to open it up. And that's just such a lie, right? To your point of, no, there's a whole playground to explore, right? You can imagine there's endless fantasies. It's just, do you even know where to start? Do you know how to talk to your partner about that? Right. And then go on from there.
Yeah. And do you use the yes, no, maybe checklist?
Yes, we do.
I just wrote about the yes, no. I have written a few times about the yes, no, maybe checklist, but I'm curious to know if you've got your own, or have you co-opted someone else's, or?
I co-opted someone else's. Yeah. It's so funny you say that. I literally sent it over to a client today. I have this one. She's an American, and she goes by the Libido Fairy. And it's this phenomenal, I mean, it's so intensive, right? Where she breaks down, okay, touching, and then underneath touching, it's like all the body parts, and you get to yes, no, or maybe that. And then we're licking, and right. So it's very detailed, very specific.
Interesting, because I'm always curious to see new ones, and I've got one by another therapist. She might be Canadian, I'm not sure, but I've just put hers as a special download on something that I've written. But I always think that it's such a great way, if you don't have any knowledge about any of this, to start the conversation without it getting awkward or uncomfortable.
Totally.
Right?
Absolutely. Yeah. To outsource, to kind of like giggle together, like, ooh, I never even thought of that. Right. Yeah. It's so helpful.
Yeah. I love it. There's Esther Perel's got some little tips and tricks, but fundamentally, it doesn't seem like, and I could be wrong about this, but it doesn't seem like there's a huge amount of activities like the yes, no, maybe checklist. I've got this thing
Yeah.
called Pillow Talk,
Yeah. Mhm.
which is cards for intimate conversations. You've
Mhm.
probably seen that from
Mhm.
the School of Life. And they do 2 or 3 other sets that
Yeah.
I think are really good. In
Yeah.
fact, I might even buy these for some Christmas presents
Oh,
now
that's
that
a
I'm
great idea. Yeah.
looking at it again. But I think that, people could use more of those sorts of techniques
Yeah.
to make it less scary
Agreed.
to talk about all of these things.
Yes, agreed. It's like adult swim lessons, right? Like I know a lot of adults who just don't really know how to swim, but it feels so embarrassing, like they should know how to swim, that they don't. Same thing. A lot of people, especially when we're this old, oh my God, how have I never learned how to talk about this? Because nobody taught you, right? And so to have tools and things to read and check off and work through, so appropriate and helpful. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I think we just need more of those. So,
Mhm.
anyway,
Mhm.
God, we've reached the end. How is that even possible?
It's been very fun chatting with you.
It has been super fun chatting with you as well. And I've really enjoyed hearing about the older people that you work with and how there's still that inclination that there could be more out there, that there are experiences, sexual experiences that they still want to explore and try. I think that's always so encouraging. And for
Mhm.
every listener out there, it's just never, ever too late
No.
to explore any of this, never too late. And it doesn't really matter if you've got health conditions, all of this stuff can be worked around if you want to.
Bingo. Absolutely.
If you want to, that's the key.
Yeah.
So, Emma, have a lovely day out on the West Coast.
And enjoy your evening.
Thank you.